Welcome to the Potter Discussion.
Welcome back to the Potter Discussion, discussing Harry Potter, Fantastic Beasts, and the Wizarding World fandom. I am your host, Oscar, and this is episode 129, part 2 of our review of the Secrets of Dumbledore. Thank you so much for joining me today. Today's episode I am quite excited for because I've been looking forward to this for a very long time. This is current Oscar, by the way. This is where I am, talking. You were hearing this just a couple days after I recorded it, because I'm not doing I didn't record 5 hours of review just to then put it out over the next couple of months. So I am doing these in time. So I've been definitely looking forward to this, especially after last week's Cursed Child episode. I got some glowing feedback from that one, which was super awesome because I really enjoyed it. I want it to be a really good episode. And not only do we have a part 2 of The Cursed Child, but also have a part 2 of The Secrets of Dumbledore, which is today's episode. And I think it's going to be a lot more than a part 2, I think. And it's going to get boring for sure. But in the future, when someone's coming back to listen, to have a lot of parts of this, I think is going to be very, very valuable. So I will try to get through as much as I can today, because I think past a part 3 gets a bit grating. So it's definitely gonna pick up the pace. I just wanted to, just have kind of a word vomit onto last week's episode, just because I'd never talked about it really before. So today, I think I'm gonna be a lot more streamlined. I'm gonna be able to get through a lot more, and I think it's gonna be definitely a lot quicker, but much faster pace, much more refreshing. That's gonna be what today's episode is all about. If you have never heard this podcast before, if this is your first episode, first of all, welcome. Thank you for joining us. If you have any feedback for the show, make sure you either send me an email. My email is ThePotterDiscussion@gmail.com. You could also use the contact form or the voice submission in the description below. And any other ways you want to contact me, Instagram is also another good one. I'm pretty active on Instagram. My Instagram handle is @ThePotterDiscussion, and it's the same on TikTok, @ThePotterDiscussion. So make sure you go follow those 2 accounts. I'm posting daily videos, a bunch of Harry Potter memes, everything that your Harry Potter heart could desire. So make sure you go check that out @Harry Potter on Instagram and TikTok. But that just about covers it all. So let's get into this episode. Okay, so jumping straight into it, we are starting off with number 1. Dumbledore and Credence didn't really feel like themselves. Now, that might seem a little confusing, considering it was about, the Secrets of Dumbledore, and it should be the most core Dumbledore you can get. But there are some really weird scenes involving both Credence and Dumbledore, and some separate scenes that I was just so confused by. I think it's good and bad that they didn't really feel like themselves, because the Dumbledore that we knew before was exactly like the Dumbledore in the Potter series. He's kind of insightful, wise. He was very confusing, and he seemed a lot more chipper. This might make no sense to some people, but he seemed a lot happier in this movie. And I think it wasn't because he was happy. I think that Dumbledore was just very much accepting of his fate. He was laughing in the face of doom, which is really where I think this is. And because obviously Jude Law knew the blood pact was being destroyed at the very end of this film, but also I think it's important to note that he was very involved with Grindelwald. And although they are on opposing sides, they don't mortally hate each other. I should say yet, but they don't mortally hate each other, and there is still a connection there. Of course, that's broken by the end of the film, as we see, but there's still something there. And I think the promise of seeing Grindelwald is one that keeps Dumbledore going, even if that's kind of a dark way of putting it, because they do love each other, and it's explicitly stated in the film. In the beginning, the end, it's a very large part, which, it was a very good thing for WB to put in. So I think that was one of the reasons. Also, Dumbledore was laughing in the face of doom. Oh, we're gonna die. So I think that was another one of it. But also, I think it was also that they were actually doing stuff. They were actually moving against him, moving against Grindelwald. And of course, Dumbledore wasn't. He couldn't. It was definitely a step forward. And now that they could move forward, I think it's definitely a reason for celebration. which is why I think Dumbledore was so happy with it, because he, was kind of like going along, coasting. At that point, he was just in the mindset of like, what do I have to lose? Now, that's not a very healthy mindset because Dumbledore has a lot to lose. But I think that was kind of why it kept him going and why he was like kind of like, yeah. And of course, obviously, I mean, this is not, an apparent thing that they put in on purpose. I doubt anyone else will tell you that that's exactly what they saw. But me personally, I just felt like Dumbledore was a lot happier, well, I shouldn't say happier. He was laughing a lot, it was kind of like cracking jokes, so he was definitely a more cheerful person. Now, whether that's a maniacal kind of cheerful or it is a different kind of cheerful, I don't know. But that was just my impression. Credence, I'm going to say, is very much not like Dumbledore. I think he is kind of following down his same path, and I think it was helped along by the fact that Credence is kind of made out to be this sad, just like sullen, kind of sunken in person who has no emotion. He doesn't like show anything. He's just mad, nothing, or sad. I mean, that's pretty much it. So we really see that come out in this film, but also what I was noticing is Credence is a lot more grown up. And it was very, very sudden. Way too sudden, I think. In the first movie, he was... What was he like? He was supposed to be like 16 or 18. He wasn't a kid, but he was certainly not an adult. Crimes of Grindelwald, I think he kind of was going into it, but he wasn't really, he was still kind of like crouched on the ground and feeding his bird. And in this movie, he has long hair, his sleeves are rolled up, his like shirt's unbuttoned, he's got a hairy chest, and we're like, what happened? And I mean, during that scene with Queenie and Credence, I felt like it could have gone two very, very different directions, and I'm thankful it went the way it did. If you know, you know. But I think it was a very difficult, very difficult thing to kind of wrap my mind around, of Credence being this kid and then suddenly becoming this adult. And it was kind of jarring almost, because he seemed much more of a wizard. And I think that he obviously was a wizard, but when Grindelwald gave him the wand, when Johnny Depp's Grindelwald gave him the wand at the end of the Crimes of Grindelwald, I think that was kind of what set it in motion. And then, if anything, I think Credence was like waiting for that. He was waiting for the sign to for someone to tell him that he could move forward. Then he did. He did it way too fast, and we have no idea where he was going with that. So I think it was done in a sense that was helpful to us. I think that's what WB was trying to do. They're trying to help us kind of go through this change of Credence. But I think he was made out to be someone that he really wasn't. And that turned into a very different person that I at least visualized Credence to be. And even in this movie, he was shifting. When I think of the very end, it was just like when Credence and Aberforth are talking, it's just the long hair that I really see as the grown up Credence. But like I said, when Credence is at Nurmengard, in his room, that is like an adult Credence. So he's even shifting throughout this movie, and I think it's a very, very fluid process, almost too fluid, because he's really turning into someone else, and maybe that's what they want to do. I mean, obviously he's kind of going down a very dark path, but it's death at the very end, and I think, like I was saying before, he is not looking good at the very end of this one, so I think he's not going to progress any further. I mean, like I've been saying, it's a very, very easy way to write Credence out, write Ezra Miller out, just to kind of get the whole dirt off the resume of the Fantastic Beasts series, so to speak. So that's kind of what I was thinking here, and I think that's really what stood out to me, at least about these two characters. But let's move on. And moving right along to point number 2, some motives I noticed were a bit muddled. And I think it was similar to that scene in the Crimes of Grindelwald when the Aurors went into the meeting of Dumbledore, Grindelwald, and his followers. The first time I saw that film, I had no idea what was happening, because at that point, Grindelwald was definitely, he was available, he had committed crimes, he was technically a criminal, but I think he was on enough of that for the Aurors to just walk in and have and arrest him, and then all of his followers to be like, yeah, good move. So I think it was that scene when the Aurors were kind of walking down, like saying, do nothing, and they were just walking through. I was so confused with that scene. That's exactly the kind of vibe. That's the energy that was given off by the scene when Yusuf Kama walked into Nurmengard Castle with Grindelwald. That's exactly the same thing. And obviously, looking back on that Crimes of Grindelwald scene, it makes so much sense. But then now, looking back on the Kama scene, it makes no sense, because I have no idea what possessed Yusuf to go in with Grindelwald. Now, obviously, he was, he betrayed Grindelwald, and maybe it was even in the note that Dumbledore said Yusuf should have, go say I sent you to spy on Grindelwald, join him, and then betray him later. I don't know, something like that. But also, I think that particular one, I think, was explained a little bit, because the whole reason Yusuf went to Grindelwald was to have the memory of Leda taken out of his head, because it was just too painful, apparently. And it did. I mean, the memory was taken out. Yusuf was like, yes, I'm all better, great. And then Grindelwald said, pledge your lead in, like you will show if you're loyal if you show up, in Bhutan. Obviously, he did. And then there was that whole scene where he was walking out, the Grindelwald's followers are like looking at Lolly and Theseus, and then Yusuf walks up with his wand and he has it. And then he turns around and he betrays Grindelwald, and I was like, what? So I think it was a foreseen thing. It makes sense, I guess, for Yusuf to betray Grindelwald. But what I did not understand was, why join him in the first place? Why couldn't Dumbledore just get rid of the memory of Leda? If Yusuf knew that he was doing something wrong, he wouldn't do it. And obviously, I think there was a possibility that Dumbledore would have refused, because memories are everything, something like that, or like, I don't know, whatever morality issue Dumbledore has with it, and maybe Yusuf knew that, so he went to Grindelwald. But just the fact that we had to puzzle that out, I think it's just too confusing. So that was a storyline that I thought was very confusing, and also with all the sending everyone off to do special tasks. That was one that I was very, very confused by. And especially the one with Bunty. So, Bunty Broadacre, that's her last name if you didn't know, but Bunty went to her task was making cases with the whole five cases, 7 parters, whatever. But that whole situation, it was Bunty's job to make the actual cases to then, to bring back to Hogwarts, then go into the room of requirement to go to Bhutan. That was really the whole point of it. And she goes to this Muggle shop, puts the case on the counter for a couple minutes, says, I need 5, leaves, and somehow, what do you know, they end up with more cases or something like that. Like, maybe it wasn't 5, whatever, but they suddenly just have, so many, in, maybe 6 or something, I don't know. So, it just made no sense to me. And why couldn't Dumbledore just have done it? I mean, I don't know, copio, pastio, something like that. There was some miscommunication here. There was something that Dumbledore just didn't think of. It would have been so easy to just copy the cases. Now, you might be saying, well, that's moving against Grindelwald. Of course you couldn't do that. Well, then say, hey, Newt, guess what I need you to do? I need you to copy these cases. Here's the spell. Then that would be that. And Bunty wouldn't have to do anything, and that would have been so much faster and easier. But nope, Dumbledore had to say, all right, Bunty, find this shop. It's on this road, this address, in this part of this city that you have to get off the train at this point, away from everyone else. Take the case. Don't be following. It was this whole process that did not have to be this whole process. I think there was a much easier way to do this that Dumbledore just didn't think of. But those are really the two that really stood out to me. But let's move on. All right, now I want to touch on a topic that was a big reveal that we finally found out that was the mystery solved, and that was Credence / Aurelius Dumbledore, of all people. So, okay, Credence's identity search has been his main focus for many, many, many years. And finally, in this movie, it is revealed that he really is Aurelius Dumbledore. It turns out that Grindelwald in movie 2 was telling the truth. Surprise, surprise. So, Credence is actually Aurelius. I mean, I call him Credence because that's really how we know him, but Credence is Aurelius, and he is Aberforth's son. Okay. There was clearly a bit of miscommunication on this part, or a bit of illegal action here, because the whole story is Credence is Aberforth's love child. He never really knew him, and his partner, Aberforth's partner, left before she had Credence. But what I think is a little strange here is, so Dumbledore says that he met Grindelwald in the same summer that Aberforth met the person that he loved. Aberforth is a couple years younger than Dumbledore, and Dumbledore was 17 when he met Grindelwald. So at maybe 14 or 15, Aberforth had a kid. Now, I think that's not what they meant. I think that was much more of just a canon mistake, or just something that was meant to be overlooked, but that makes this a lot more confusing. Because the whole point is that Aurelius is finding his parents, and he's finding who he is. Then it's like, it's Aberforth. They're just like, oh, okay. And we kind of move on from that, and then he's dead. Great. So that storyline was built up to be this big thing that was then going to be like come in later, and Credence was going to, saunter in, and he's going to be like, I'm your father, Grindelwald, or like some Star Wars-esque moment. And speaking of that, I was like expecting him to either, of course, if he wasn't a Dumbledore, I was just going to be done, because he was going to say he's a Skywalker or something. It was going to be kind of confusing, but there was going to be a situation if he hadn't revealed that he was a Dumbledore, and especially if he had died before Credence even found out who he was. I think that would have been the worst part, because then we would have no idea, and that would have been infuriating. Just 2 movies of motive just thrown out the drain, which I think would have been absolutely stupid, if I do say so myself. But if Credence, so Aberforth is Credence's kid, I think that makes sense. It is fine. Main character, he's not Dumbledore's child, he's Aberforth's child. He's a brother, he's someone we know, and it kind of makes ends meet. Whatever, buttoned up, now he's dead. Fantastic. That's the storyline ended, but I think it was too neat. Now, this is kind of tying back to, will there be a next movie? But I think it was very much kind of brought to a close. I also noticed some fan service in there, in the scene where Aberforth and Credence were talking. Credence was like, did you love me? And then Aberforth said, always, like Snape did when he was dying in the 8th movie. So I think that was kind of fan service, and I was like, all right, blech. But yeah, that was really what I was kind of noticing and really questioning. Why would they wrap that up so nicely if it was this huge storyline? I thought it would mean more, like, because Credence was a Dumbledore, then he could team up with Albus, and they could, break the blood pact together, or they could like transfer it to Credence, and then Credence would like sacrifice himself or something like that. So I thought it would mean a lot more, but it turned out that it was just he was Aberforth's child and he's a Dumbledore. So there you go, and it was like almost a letdown. It was so anticlimactic, because Dumbledore, like at the very end, at the end, like the cliffhanger at the Crimson Grindelwald was, it's the name I bestow upon you, says Grindelwald, Aurelius Dumbledore, and then Credence shoots the ball and explodes a mountain, and the Phoenix appears, and that's that. Great. And then we were like, oh my gosh, the mystery is solved. Credence is Dumbledore. Oh my gosh, it's a miracle. But then it turns out, maybe he's not. Maybe Aurelia's in him. Maybe he's not. Maybe he's Corvus Lestrange. And then we're just like, and then Aberforth was like, no, actually he is. And then we're like, well, okay, it was a whole thing, and now it's not. That was kind of just a like, what the heck after that? Like, what are you doing? I didn't even like understand why they would want to do that, but that's my big vent of Credence for the day. But let's move on before I decide to get any more ideas. So, the story is now in a place where we are in a very pivotal position. It is 1932, at the end of the Secrets of Dumbledore, which is a couple months after the events of the Crimes of Grindelwald. Or Is it a? I don't know. But in this whole universe, the duel between Dumbledore and Grindelwald is 1945. Now, I think this is an issue because the box office is not doing very well, and that unfortunately is what decides these kinds of films. So far, The Secrets of Dumbledore has domestically grossed $59,171. Internationally, it has grossed $252,500,000. And worldwide, it has a whopping total of $334,559,171 for their entire money making. Now, that will likely go up. This is not the end of their ticket sales. They are certainly selling tickets, but 70 million of them? They spent about $200, this is a big budget, $200 film. They spent $200 million on this film and about twice that on marketing. So they have not made a profit. And keep in mind, they also have to pay the actors, all the directors, everything. It's gonna add up to, I mean, I am no film expert, but at least half $500 million, which is kind of a lot of money, if you don't know. So I think that is where we kind of are, and that is kind of not a good thing, because if we do not come out on top, if we are not even close, if we do not make more money from this, that means there likely will not be a next movie, which would be really sad. I really like this movie. I think it is a good addition. I think it sets up for a very nice story. But if there's not a next film, I mean, I don't know. I think WB definitely buttoned this up. So if there could be, I think they had a nice wrap up, and there could be if they didn't have a next film, it wouldn't be completely out of the blue. The story's still going, even though it kind of is. Grindelwald jumped off a building. He disapparated. He was gone. And he's out there somewhere. And they're like, all right, see you later. So I think that's not how they're going to have to do this. It's going to be very painful. Here's what I think there's going to be. One more film. I think there's going to be one more film, and it's going to cover either the rest of the entire storyline or, no story at all. Because what they could do is set up this impossible task where they do 1933, Newt is here and there, 1944, not 1934, he's in Germany, he's trying to, spy on Anton Vogler, and then 1937, he's with Dumbledore at Ilvermorny, and they're with Lolly, they're discussing classes when they get attacked, 1939, he's on the run, 1940, Grindelwald's on the rise again, 1945, they have the duel, so it might be something like that, or it's going to be a year, and they're going to end the story somehow. They're going to reveal something, or have a flashback, or something like that. That's just going to wrap everything up, because if they decide to do a next film, they have to wrap it up. Because obviously, if they don't make, a couple $1 billion off the next one, they're not going to make another film, which would be a tragedy, because the Fantastic Beasts series is really good. But where's the story now? Well, like I said before, the very end of this film was when Grindelwald was at the very edge. He threw his tantrum. He was really mad. He lost the election. The Chillin didn't bow. And he got off the edge, and his war with the Muggles did not begin today. And he got on the edge of the building, and he just fell off and disapparated. Dumbledore ran to the edge. He looked over, and he was gone. Very dramatic. Very Fantastic Beasts. That was that. That was kind of the end of the main story in this situation, and that was kind of, the wrap-up of the film. So that's kind of where we are. I think where we're going is, like I said, going to depend on the next film. Depending if there is one or not. I think I cannot make any bold predictions because I do not know what the next film is or what's going to be. I think when there's a title drop, when there's a trailer drop, of course, I'm talking years ahead. I'm not saying this is imminent. Years in the future, when there's a title, when there's a name, when there's a trailer. If there is, then I'll make my predictions. I'm saying, there's no way we can know anything at this point, and because the film is still going. So there's a lot still to be discovered, and there's a lot still to be discussed. I don't think we can fit it all into this episode right now, but I think the predictions are going to continue to unravel, and I'm not gonna make a break because I want to finish. I want to get one more down. I want to get one more talking point down, and that is Mads versus Johnny Depp. How did Mads kind of take over Grindelwald? I think versus, if it's a question of either or, I think I liked Mads a lot better. I think Johnny Depp was a fantastic Grindelwald. He knew the character. He really understood what he was doing. He's a fantastic actor, but that's not really the Grindelwald that I kind of understand. I think the Mads Grindelwald is much more of a person because, Johnny Depp he had his spiky blonde hair, he had his robes and his high heels, and the Elder Wand's eye was a different color, and he was this otherworldly person that was almost like alien. But Mads just seemed kind of normal. He was approachable. He was very much the Grindelwald that I can see kind of becoming this formidable power. So that's kind of what I saw in him. Mads was much more approachable. He seemed much more of a person, and although he was not, he killed the Chill and he used necromancy to rig the election for the Supreme Mugwump. But I think, but he's definitely much better at putting on a face, because I think Johnny Depp was his Grindelwald was much more of a talker, and Grindelwald in the Secrets of Dumbledore, Mads was much more of all about appearances and stuff, and he just knew how to live. He knew how to make people understand who he was. Mads, he knew how to really just kind of draw a crowd, and I think that was reflected in how much of a crowd he drew, with so many supporters he had, with all that stuff. I think it was definitely made a lot easier to kind of grasp with Mads in the seat of Grindelwald. And although the Credence of Grindelwald was kind of painful to watch, I think that's kind of why it played into this situation of why it wasn't really a fantastic portrayal of Grindelwald, which I think is kind of unfair almost, but it does make sense. So there's a lot of stuff in this discussion of whether it's Mads or Depp that's the best, but I think a universally agreed upon fact is The Crimes of Grindelwald was not the best Fantastic Beasts film by far. So that is one thing that we can all agree on, and Mads was just my personal favorite Grindelwald. So take that to heart. But if that is not you, what do you think? Please let me know, because I want to definitely talk more about this. Your opinions, I'd love to know. My email is ThePotterDiscussion@gmail.com. Like I said before, we have the contact forms in the show notes. We have a SpeakPipe paging for a voice submission and a Google form for a text submission. You can also send me a DM on Instagram. My Instagram is @ThePotterDiscussion. I am the same on TikTok, like I've never said before. But there you have it. That's really the end of this discussion. I am definitely glad that we got through a lot more than the first one. I'm trying to see my document here. This is a digital document, which is very strange. I always have a notebook, but right when I walked out of the theater, I didn't have my notebook. I wanted to put my ideas down, so I just whipped out my phone and started smashing into notes. So that's where this episode is. Very unprofessional, but I think it's definitely a good start, a good end. I'm trying to see. Oh my gosh, there's so much to go. So this is a long journey. I think this is much more of a marathon than a sprint. But if we just stick with it, if we keep going, I think that will be it will definitely pay off in the end. So thank you for listening to this episode. And as always, remember that happiness can be found even in the darkest of times if one only remembers to turn on the light. I will see you later.
This was the Potter Discussion.